My friends, what you're about to see is just a painting, but it represents God's amazing grace through Jesus who gave his life so that we could have eternal life. My friends, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Hey there, everybody. My name's Ray.
And I'm Ray's Figment of Imagination.
Welcome back to Ray's Art Adventure.
Episode 6.
In today's episode, we're going to go back in time to, around 2017 when I did a painting for a local ministry located in Eustis, Florida. One Fire is what I call an urban ministry in a small downtown, which ministered to anybody that wanted to come in, and they would worship on Friday nights and start off with a potluck, worship and singing, followed usually by a message and a testimony or two, and a sharing of the love of Jesus.
Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
Especially the potluck dinner.
Yeah, free food for anybody who wanted to show up.
Praise the Lord.
Amen. So with that contemporary urban thought process in mind, I was originally, as you can see here, I was working on a sketch idea of trying to show Jesus both in his powerful coming back as the Lion of Judah, but also his saving grace side of being the Good Shepherd. And I wanted the crucifix position to show that he was also the sacrificial lamb, and that's kind of why I wanted it on a wood background. My original thought, again, was to keep it in a contemporary fashion, so I actually was thinking of doing like black and white line art on the wood and having it more like a graphic comic book. Here you can see I tried out various pens and pencils, from a Sharpie marker to an ebony pencil, to some various other pens and markers to see which one I would like to work out on the wood, which one would be more permanent and durable, and would actually work with the texture of the wood. However, as the sketch progressed, I really started liking the idea and feeling like this needed to be something more than a comic book representation of Christ. I wanted to have a little more realism, and I just felt like the idea was growing, and I wanted to bring more solidity to it. So here you can see I have a sample where I started painting over with oil paint, kind of doing it in a monotone color. And here I did a sample with oil paint, adding color so it would be more realistic, I guess. The concept originally had him holding a staff in one hand as king.
You mean scepter?
And then in the other hand, he would be holding a shepherd's staff there as the Good Shepherd again. It also had him wearing kind of like a headdress there with the lamb on one side and the lion on the other to kind of represent his roles. These items changed somewhat as things progress, as you'll see. I definitely wanted this to be a strong representation of Christ. While often portrayed as meek, humble, and loving, which he is also coming back in power and as king and judge. The initial sketch was done on a 1/4-inch piece of Luan plywood, so I could start to get an idea of what the final piece would look like on a smooth sheet of birch plywood.
Whoa, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, wait a minute. We better do viewer discretion as advised.
Is it that bad?
I'm scarred for life.
Yeah, honestly, I'm a little self-conscious about it myself. Alright, let's get into it. So after the initial sketches and thumbnails and just deciding what I wanted the image to look like and had a good idea, I went out and took some reference photos of myself since I was the only one available at the time. No, I wanted to get the spacing and stuff right before I decided to get a model and try to go any further. So here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and as you can see, here's a photo that I just took of myself up against a blank wall, trying to get the proportions right to see what it would look like. And as you see here, I took out a bunch of different photos, different positions of hands and head positions and stuff, just to get an idea again of the proportions and the spacing. So once I had kind of established that, and thinking of my original sketch that you saw earlier, I was thinking the hands were actually going to hold something, whether a staff in one hand and a sword in the other. It's kind of my initial concept. I had this photo set up and brought in. And so in Adobe Illustrator, I created a 1 foot by 1 foot grid that would allow me to transfer it over to the panels when I was done. So this gets proportion of, so here you can see this is 5 grid spaces here. So again, that's 5 feet by 3 feet, as you can see going up here. So the whole thing total was 8 foot tall by, I guess it's 13 feet wide. So it's quite large, but again, working on the spacing. Yeah, well, self-conscious doing this.
Me too.
But once I got that established, that left me the path to create the final photos, which I ended up using myself here because I couldn't find anybody that was willing to sit for the reference. So I did end up using myself here, and I thought, well, it'll be fine.
Hey, it's cheap model fee.
Yeah, right? So here, to the grid size here, so this panel here being 5 by 3, this panel in the middle being a full 8 foot by 3 foot here. And I'm going to be cutting this out of plywood, birch plywood, so I wanted to be able to have the centerpiece as one piece, and then this would be attached to it later. After doing the layout on the top, I just felt like this wasn't the cross shape that I wanted, and I wanted it to be a little bit more of a finished cross shape down. I wasn't going to do the whole body, but so I developed this further and took some more photos and actually made a piece lower. So this bottom piece here, after the 8 foot, is also attached. I had enough room, it looked like, in the ceiling to get this in there. So I had extra 3 feet on the bottom to give it more of a full crucifixion look. Oh, special thanks to my friend Malcolm Yawn, who did the photography.
Thanks, bro.
This was actually, believe it or not, this was actually a crown of thorns that came from Jerusalem. I had a local pastor who loaned that to me. And so I was able to put that on there. Obviously, it's a little bit big for my head, but it was something just to put in position and get reference for.
It's a little crooked.
It was sharp. I didn't want to move it. I think that's it for right here. Let's move on. Here's my reference of myself here on the panels. The Our Lord Jesus on the panel there. And I'm going to get a model for the face. Don't worry about that.
Heard that before.
We've got the panel actually. Let's see if I can pull back here. I've enlarged the artwork with a grid pattern. And then actually I had my friend Ed, he blew it up for me. So what we've got is this grid pattern here. And let's see if I can, and then this is the plywood surface that it's going to be going on. And I've just rubbed some charcoal on the back of that. And as you can see, it's transferred the line to the board. So we'll be getting ready to that'll give me an indication of where I need to start painting at, and it will help keep the edges clean with the birch plywood behind it. Here you can see I started painting the hand where Jesus is going to be holding actually a key to the kingdom. The original reference I had was more of my hand holding a staff, and then the final reference I had there was the fist kind of closed. So I kind of went somewhere between the two. So it's important to have some good photo reference when you're trying to illustrate things in a realistic perspective. Okay, so here we're actually getting starting on the painting here, and as you can see, I have my reference blown up, and then here's the painting of the actual hand starting out with. Down here is my paints kind of mixed up on paper plates, actually like foam plates there, and my desk here is a little bit messy.
Really?
I've got basic colors here mixed out, so I've made this chart. You can see that. We've got a highlight color in the upper left-hand corner there. That's some yellow ochre and white, and then the light color is yellow ochre and white also, just a little different variation. Mid-tone being in the center there, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and white. And then the shadow, let's see, well, I'll tell you what, I'll zoom in, you can read it. Well, you can't read my chicken scratch, but there's the proportions of it. Shadow, cast shadow color, going down here to your dark accent, your transition pink color, transition color for receding, which is a gray. The old masters used to use that in some of the shadow areas. You can see here I've got some of this gray that's in here, kind of makes the figure recede in those areas. And then the transition color, which is kind of like a bright, just something to bring a little pop to it in those highlight transition areas, going from the highlight mid-tone into the shadow tone. So just to clarify, the numbers next to the colors are the proportions. For instance, in the highlight color, you have 1 part yellow ochre to 5 parts white. The colors themselves are Winsor & Newton fine art oil colors, and they are really some of the best colors you can get. They're permanent, and I really wanted something that was archival, so I really like the quality of those paints. Here's a close-up look at the finished hand. Unfortunately, I didn't get a process video of me showing actually painting it, but I will go into a little bit more of a step-by-step procedure on the other hand, just so you kind of get an idea of the process. In this photo, I've got the arm painted in, and in the rough brush strokes, all the main colors are in. Here's a closer view which shows the brush strokes. And the final modeled arm with the tones blended. The painting procedure for the entire painting is basically the same. I've got a pencil outline on my birch plywood, and then I run up a thin layer of linseed oil onto the panel, and I kind of use that as my medium. I like to work like a wet and wet type of technique. So instead of mixing a lot of medium with my actual paint colors, I actually just rub it on the panel ahead of time and then work my colors into it. Normally I would use a sable brush to put this color in, but I think I used an actual bristle filbert, mostly because of the texture of the plywood.
As you can see here, I'm starting on the right hand
You got a cold?
of the painting, and I've got my photo reference here.
I don't think so.
And what I've done is I put a little linseed oil on the surface, rubbed very thinly to start out with.
I don't want to catch nothing.
And then with a darker color, burnt umber.
You won't.
And maybe a little yellow ochre there, a little bit of white just to lighten it just a bit. Using a kind of an outline, I have you can see here, tracing of pencil that I've done underneath. So that's under there, and I'm using it just as a guide. And then I've got my outline drawn, and I'm starting to add in the shadow color here of the dark brown area. Here is the shadow color, which for the dark shadow areas, excuse me, got a little cold this morning.
What?
But just want to make a note here, in this particular mix, I've got some burnt umber, 1 part burnt umber, 1 part white, and 2 parts of the yellow ochre. The yellow ochre is a little bit of a dry color, so I've added just a few drops of linseed oil here on the palette that'll be mixed and kind of give it a little liquid consistency. When I actually paint, I've got in my mixture over here, I've got some linseed oil in this container here, and this is a mix here. It's mostly just mineral spirits here, a paint thinner, and then maybe a few drops of linseed oil added in just to give it a little bit of I don't want to say thinness because it's oil. Just give a little bit more body so the thinner is not so runny. But that's pretty much all the medium I use. It's just a linseed oil and then maybe a little paint thinner as well. And I usually mix it in the color as I go. But not a tremendous amount of medium or anything because up on the board I've already got a light, thin coat of linseed oil that's rubbed over the surface. So that kind of gives me a little wet and wet feel to it. So I don't have to get my paints real syrupy. So here I've got my color mixed up on the palette here. This is my shadow tone here, and I am just kind of putting it in with a filbert bristle brush, and I'm trying to hold this camera as I do the painting at the same time. So anyway, just indicating the main shadow areas. Wanted to just give an idea where light is not falling, so we see where our highlights are going to be and then where our shadow is. Again, looking at the reference here. And that's basically it, and I'll just go through the painting and just indicating form as I go along.
Here I have the shadow areas in.
Looks like milk chocolate.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Is that a paint color?
I don't think so.
Should be.
So I have a medium flesh color here and mid-tone, and I've got the mid-tone painted in there. So we have the shadow, the outline, the shadow, and then the mid-tones painted. It's a little bit red, but I'm going to adjust that as I go. So my next step is to do the light color, which you see here on the left. This is saved for more of the highlight color here, but this is the light color of the flesh. And so I've put that in various areas here, starting to model the form a little bit, lighten up those other colors a little bit more, but not blending a great deal at this point, just laying in the colors and trying to put them in their appropriate spots. So after highlighting, adding in my highlight color, then I've gone back to what I call my transitional colors here. And as you can see, I've added them in. I've got some rose color here just to get some warm areas of the flesh. This gray kind of indicates a receding area, helps the form turn a little bit. It looks a little patchy now, of course, because it really hasn't been blended, but all these colors I'm going to be starting to blend together with my soft, what I call a hake brush here, and then this will just make everything blend together for the first stage. And right now I've probably had a little bit over an hour of time into it.
Now we have all the colors in and in the right locations, and now it's time to start the blending. And this is where we really can see the form starting to take shape.
And as you can see here, I'm trying to do this, holding this together here. It's just I've got this brush. I'm lightly brushing it, just soft enough to blend the shapes without totally killing the color. I just put them together, and sometimes you'll stamp it like that, get to blend a little bit more. And it builds up on the brush, and you just take and wipe that off on a paper towel. Keep it somewhat clean, so you don't want it to get really soggy with the paint, so to speak. You want to keep it kind of dry, and little butterfly strokes can blend this together. Here we have all the colors blended together on the first layer. I know it's probably hard to see. You've got some glare coming in from those lights above, but it looks a little patchy still, and because it's darker than what I really intended, I'm going to go back and do mainly the highlight colors just to bring out some detail. I'll go back with a dark brown first, though, just to indicate some folds in the skin or creases, and then go back with the highlight to bring it up to a little bit lighter level overall.
So I went back in and refined the colors, again starting with my darker colors, then working to my lighter colors, redefining the shapes, adding a little bit of color, bringing up the value of the whole thing and the tone, and blending it out, and just kind of a process of going back and forth and fine-tuning.
Okay, so here's the finished arm. I've got a little bit of gray maybe in the middle there that I might need to tone down a little bit. I know it's hard to see that hand as I shift around here. You can see that get some of the glare off from just the overhead fluorescent there. Overall, I'm pretty happy with it though, and again, that panel is 5 feet wide, so I'll let it dry, and then I'm going to do some additional glazing and stuff on it too in the future, and then I'm also going to go ahead and put the nail marks here, the nail for that side for Christ's palm there. So I'm getting ready to paint the hand, the nail and the hand here, and I've just made a little tissue sketch here. I wanted to see about placement. Wanted to see if I want to put some perspective on the nail coming down in this, or just show the top of it. I think I've decided to do a little perspective like we've got it there. So I'll pull that off. Put a little glaze on there, a little linseed oil, and then we'll start painting into that.
Here you can see I have the nail placed in the palm, and I know there's some scholarly debate as to whether the nail was in the palm or the wrist, but I'm not as concerned with that as with the imagery and what it's trying to portray.
Still horrible either way.
Yes, it was. For all you interested artists out there, here's a review of the step-by-step process I took.
Wait for it.
Alright, now moving on to the main body. This panel is 3 foot by 8 foot tall, and I couldn't even fit it in my studio because at the time I was in a studio that was only like, I had like a 7 foot high ceiling, so I had to kind of lean it back against my board there to get it laid out. And can I just say and be honest up front that it's a little awkward trying to work on something where you have an 8 foot picture of yourself in your studio.
Yeah, especially when you're half naked.
Yeah, right? At any rate, the painting process basically was the same as the hand, starting with the pencil outline and then the fine brown line, an indication of shadows, and mid-tone and highlight flesh colors.
Before I start blending it, I want to get a little video here if I can show you some of the textures in my hand for size here. Some of the brush strokes that are in there before I blend. You can see that. Kind of gives you an idea of what level I take it to before I blend it further with a soft brush. I had to redo the whole sash kind of gown there on the side. Just didn't like the shape of it before, so I had to repaint over that. Okay, here's the colors blended out at this point. So smoother, as you can see, and gives a nice effect. It's a really nice effect.
Have you put on weight?
No comment.
Probably all that milk chocolate you've been painting with.
Oh brother, here's a look at the finished midsection.
Nice.
Now I added his lower garment and brightened up the sash there, and you can see the reference that I had with the fabric laying over the table. Finally, on the torso, I wanted to show some wounds that Jesus did incur Obviously, it was probably a lot more bloody than this, so I wanted to show that, but I didn't want to get too graphic with it because I just felt like this is going to be in a public space where people are going to look at it all the time, and there might even be young viewers present. Before I actually finished this, I had a select group of people that I invited from the church to kind of preview this ahead of time to determine how far I should actually take this and what would have the best impact without it seeming too gory.
Crucifixion's about as gory as it gets.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't want to just gloss over it either. In deciding what the face of Jesus should look like, I drew inspiration from a variety of different references, from various paintings, even a 3D image that was projected from the Shroud of Turin, along with the local pastor of One Fire there. And I composited a lot of them together, the beard sources, the hair sources, so from a variety. So it's really not one person that I use as reference. It's a combination of different sources, and yes, including myself.
Getting started on the face of Jesus today. Unfortunately, the ceiling in my studio here is too small, too low to try to stand the painting up and work on it straight, so I'm having to lay it flat here. So I worked in the eyes a little bit last night, and I'll be adding some glazes to them as we go. My palettes out here, the basic flesh tone colors, and then some individual colors there that we used in the eye last night. Let's see here, bristle brushes, some filberts, basically some various size filberts, and then over here I've got little old sable brushes that I've used for blending areas, and then just a liner brush, sable.
After I completed the eyes, I started again with the pencil outline, and then indicated the outlines in the brown, and then added some of the shadow tone. After completing the modeling on the face, I started putting in the hair with a dark brown, probably a burnt sienna, burnt umber color. And I gotta say, working with oil paint on a horizontal surface was just kind of a nightmare, really. I had to be very aware of where I laid my hand so that I wouldn't smear something below me. The dark brown base coat of the hair and the beard are now in place. I now begin to model highlights and color into the beard and eyebrows. And as you notice, I keep the right side of the painting, the beard and the eyebrows, much older looking. I wanted some gray in there. I wanted that to represent Christ when he comes back in Revelation as king. So I wanted to show his age and his wisdom and just his power and his timelessness. While on the left side of the painting, wanting to show Jesus in his human nature of a man in his early 30s. Also note that on his left side, the colors are a little cooler, and I wanted to indicate some bruising and the fact that that's the suffering part of Christ. Oh, while I'm looking at this, I want to mention that I have a lot of different colors in the eyes, all the way from browns to blues to greens, and it ended up being kind of a greenish color because I wanted it to represent all of humanity. So I didn't just go with brown, which is probably what they were, but no one really knows for sure. But again, I'm just trying to represent all of humanity within this picture of Christ.
And your friend Rachel, who says it's because her eyes are green.
Well, she did encourage me and pray for me during this painting process. After modeling the beard and the eyebrows, I went ahead and did the hair on both sides to match. Now, in keeping with the transition theme of the suffering servant to the glorious king that's going to come, I started on the left side here with the crown of thorns, and that is transformed into a real crown, kind of just a regal thing. I didn't want anything too gaudy. I just wanted symbolic of Christ's kingship. Nearing completion now, you can see that I've added more wounds on the face of Christ. Final touches include adding an aura or halo of white light, as is described in Revelation. At the completion of the painting, I was honored to have a reveal at One Fire and to be able to present the gospel.
Often the world thinks of Jesus just as this warm, lovey-dovey, feel-good, all-forgiving, good luck charm. However, for us, for the world, it's important to realize that the real resurrected Jesus Christ is going to come back the second time, not as a lamb, but as a lion, as a judge, as King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
I want to see you right there, 'cause I know that your eyes are like flames. flames of fire. I know that your head is white as wool, and I know that your voice, it sounds like waters. Jesus, you're beautiful. Yes, I know that your eyes are like flames of fire. I know that your head is white as wool, and I know that your voice, it sounds like waters. Jesus, you're beautiful.
Before I end this video, I would like to just express my thanks and appreciation for the worship team at One Fire and for all of my friends and relatives who joined me for the reveal.
And now let's thank our viewing audience for putting up with such a long video.
Hey, I think they enjoyed it.
What about the shirtless part?
Good point.
See you next time, everybody.
I just want to say one thing. This is beautiful. This whole presentation is beautiful. But this right here, this is a picture. It's a picture, that's all it is. We're not worshiping this picture. We worship our God. Do you understand that? That this is just a picture. Our God is bigger than this picture. Much bigger than this picture. This is a symbol of what he's done. This is a symbol of what he stands for. Our God, he lives in each one of us. And if he doesn't live in you, he can live in you. He wants to live in you. Right now, today, I want you guys to think about this. Think about what Ray is saying. Man, this is a powerful symbol. Powerful. I fell to my knees when I saw this. There's nothing spiritual about this, but it represents what this man did, what God did for us, and who he was and what he did and where he is now. Man, what God did, what Jesus did was all out of love. Because he loves us. It's a love that we're never going to get anywhere else. No matter how far we search and what we seek, no woman, no man, no drug, no alcohol, nothing is going to love us like this man loves us. And it's right here, right now for you. You can receive this love tonight. Right here. If you're not right with God, if you don't feel like you're a child of God, come on. Don't waste any more time. You've got nothing to lose, I guarantee you. I promise you. Tony wants you guys to stand up. Pastor Tony wants you guys to stand up. I want you guys to stand up. Harry wants you guys to stand up because we're going to celebrate the King. We're not going to celebrate this picture, but we can look at it and love it and know what he's done for us, right? And we can say, Ray, you did an awesome job. You did an awesome job painting and representing our God. We don't even know what he looks like. Honestly, we don't know what he looks like. Right? The Bible doesn't really say what he looks like, but this is a pretty good version of him. But you know what? I was talking before. You see how big that God is? Listen, in our heads, in our minds, that's what we should look at it like. That's how we should think about it. Man, when I'm living life, when I'm doing this, and I see the enemy coming at me, man, I've got a God like that standing behind me. I've got a God like that that's bigger than me, that's bigger than what's in front of me, and it's a God like that who's not going down. He's got the keys of heaven. He's got the keys of hell. Satan doesn't even know the keys of his own house. God's holding them right there. God's got them in his hand.